This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the May 13th edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Fornatale, back with you alongside the usual crew, and that includes Mike Hogan, a.k.a. at DRF Formulator. What's up, Mike?
What are we, 8 days away from the Preakness now? So I think we've got the Derby out of the way, the hangover is done, and now I'm looking forward to the second leg next week.
And we've also got calling in from the planet Texas at UT Big Hair, the NHC Tour champion, Jonathon Kinchen. Jonathon, folks were a little worried about you after Wednesday's show. There were cards, there were comments. Somebody even sent you a box of chocolates, from what I understand. Are you feeling a little better on this Friday?
It's funny, to be honest. What I did was I got a six-pack, and I took my NHC Tour Championship trophy bowl, and I filled it up, and I drank the whole thing. I've been fine ever since.
The cure. We'll have to see if the likes of Brent Sumja and the other NHC Tour winners, Eric Moomey, folks, if anyone else has tried that and see if it's an effective thing, we could get a page on a website at the least touting this new medical cure-all. But I'm glad to hear that you're feeling fine. You sound better. We got some fun races we're going to be talking about later on in the show, as long as it's okay with you guys. In addition to the 4 selected public handicapper races, I was thinking we would throw in the Peter Pan for discussion. Don't know, you guys might not be prepared for that, but I think we can at least talk about it in broad terms if we can't give a specific pick. Is that cool with you guys? Have either of you looked at the Peter Pan?
Yeah, a little bit.
Good with me.
Yeah.
Cool. And but before we get to that, I had so many Derby questions for you guys on Wednesday. We didn't even get to them all, but I pivoted away anyway because I wanted to do at least 15 minutes on some of the other excellent racing that happened last Saturday. But now we've got a couple more days between us and the Derby. As Mike said, the Preakness, basically we're nipping at its heels now. I think there's a couple more questions from the Derby that I want to start the show with. I think that's a topic that's of interest to just about everybody listening anyway. And one thing that I wanted to highlight was a really interesting tweet that I saw from Marty McGee, our colleague at DRF. What is Marty's Twitter handle? Do you know off the top of your head, Mike? You're good with Twitter stuff.
I think it's just DRF McGee. Let me look real quick.
Double check that.
Yeah,
We're going with at DRF McGee. Very worthy Twitter follow. Had some very interesting stuff. Is in the process of chasing down this little mini story about the Churchill pick 6 last night. He's an absolutely worthy follow. But he was the one, I'm giving him credit for it because he was the first one I saw say this. If it's from somebody else, I apologize, and I'll give you the hat tip retroactively. But he made the point about the coinciding, not that it's a coincidence, but the coinciding between Derby favorites winning and the new Derby point system. He didn't come out and suggest there was any causality there. Personally, I think there might be, but I'll start by asking you guys, and we'll start with Jonathon. Do you think there's anything to this idea of favorites winning and the new point system, or do you think this could be a fooled by randomness situation?
I think it could be a little bit of a fooled by randomness situation. I think 2 horses in particular that have won the Derby in the last 10 years make people assume that a little bit more, with Mind That Bird and Giacomo coming from way off the pace, closing into fast paces and such, whatever. I mean, if you think about it, I'll have another. Didn't get like a crazy good setup that day. He wasn't far out of it. He was mid-pack. Animal Kingdom, didn't overcome any kind of crazy pace scenarios or get any crazy pace setup. So I think it's just circumstantial. If you look back at the favorites that have won, Orb was a slight favorite with a huge setup. California Chrome has proven to be a pretty darn good horse. American Pharaoh has done the same, and we'll see that the jury's still out on Nyquist. But I think it's more coincidental. I would want to see more consistency. Maybe 3 or 4 more years down the line, I'd be willing to sign on to that idea.
I think I'm going to just jump in, Mike. I want to hear your point on this, but what Jonathon said sort of tees up the point I was going to make nicely, though I am sort of taking the other side of it a little bit, in that you point out that those big bombs were products, the big bombs under the old system were products of pace meltdowns. And I do think there's something to be said to the idea that the biggest difference between going with graded earnings and going with the point system is the elimination of a lot of sprinters, horses who now would not get the points, getting the points back then. We're talking about like the Trinibergs of the world. And I do believe that these horses change the dynamics of the race very significantly in that the best dirt horses, i.e. typically, almost always, the ones with the most tactical speed, many of those years under the old system were having to lay so close or maybe move early that you saw a lot of really, really live horses, even clearly best horses of their generation, when I'm thinking about a horse like Point Given, having to deal with a fast pace and moving a little early into it. You take, now I don't remember the specifics of the 2000 Derby, and I should have looked this up, but I'm kind of making this point on the fly. I don't remember if there was some stretch out speed there that created that fast pace, but I feel like in these last few years we've had, without that kind of sprinter speed in the race, these route horses who, again, because they're such good dirt horses, they are also the same ones with the best tactical speed in a race without these stretch out sprinter types. I do think it may allow them, I'm not going to say the favorite's going to win every year, but I think there's something to the idea that if the Derby point system stays for 20 years, we'll look back at this and say, okay, that was a sea change, and it clearly gives an advantage to the sort of on-paper form horses who are best coming into the race. Mike, what do you think about the point I just made and Jonathan's take on this whole issue about the Derby point system and the favorites?
Well, first I'll go back to your point about the 2000 Kentucky Derby, and I'm going to mention a little horse. Actually, 2000 was Fupeg.
2001.
2001. So 2001, I'm taking a look at the PPs right now. I don't think that there was necessarily a stretch-out sprinter that changed the pace dynamics so much. In 2000, there was Trippy. There has been a few, but I think you're right, Pete. It does eliminate these sprinters. It does eliminate the Trinibergs of the world. It eliminates the turf horses as well, who earn graded stakes in turf events. It eliminates the fillies unless they choose to run in one of the Derby preps that get points. So you don't have necessarily the genuine risks in the winning colors unless they're prepping in the Santa Anita Derby or the Wood or something like that. So it does change a lot of the dynamics, and I think it also does, as you mentioned, focus more heavily on the in-form horses, because the ones that get the most points are the ones that have hit the board in the most recent preps. So you're not going to necessarily have a horse like Swipe, who was second in the Breeders' Cup, but is still kind of up against it points-wise. So that's, I think, the biggest change. Whether or not it has led to a series and a run of chalk, I think the jury's a little, it's a little early to say. The jury's still out on that one.
Oh, well, for sure. I mean, I'm not saying it's like some definite thing. This is just like a total hypothesis, guess at this point. I mean, let's look more at Triniberg, who ran in the 2012 Derby, which before the point system was in. Yes, Bodemeister was ahead of Triniberg in that race, but I don't know, the way I'm remembering it, Triniberg's presence in the race was pushing Bodemeister to run as fast as he was. Without Triniberg, Jonathan, does Bodemeister beat I'll Have Another in the 2012 Derby?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at least my bankroll hopes so. Yeah, no, I mean, he goes a second slower if he's not having to outrun Triniberg for the lead,
And that would be another winning favorite then, had that happened. So again, I'm not sure about this. I don't think it's not gonna change the way I'm gonna bet future derbies. It's a little more of an academic conversation. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I just think it's something interesting to note that I think can maybe inform our horseplay in general. Just
regardless of your opinion of which one it is, I think there's no question that the point system has significantly affected the running of the race. I just don't know if it's influenced so much why the favorite has won. That's my point.
I will agree, and I will say this, especially, I guess we've really dealt with the point system now for 3 years. Is that right?
is it? Yes, it's no, it's 4, isn't it?
4. It was Orb was the first.
That's what I thought.
Okay, so then
I
it would
thought
be.
it was the run of favorites. I thought it was 4 point system years, 4 favorites, and then I'm making the point that it would have been 5 favorites if it had been the point system in 2012.
Fair enough, but so I'll counter that with a question for you guys, and this is maybe a rhetorical question, but if you have an answer, feel free. In terms of the point system versus the previous system, what live long shot was excluded in these last few years that would have very possibly knocked off Orb, California Chrome, American Pharaoh, Nyquist?
It's an interesting question. You certainly have to look at. I mean, I don't remember my memory. You know, I barely remember what I had for breakfast, and that was 2 hours ago. So I mean, trying to remember PPs from 3 years ago isn't going to happen. But I mean, just to talk about this year, I don't know that they would have done it. But I mean, a horse like Unified, who we're going to talk about in the second half of the show, theoretically, they could have taken a shot in a race like the Kentucky Derby. Again, I have to do all the math and look at the graded earnings, but I'm assuming a horse like that would have been a lot closer to having a chance to run or maybe even run. Apologies to listeners for not doing all the research ahead of time and actually being able to tell you definitively that Unified could have run. I don't know if he would have made it anyway, but that's the type of horse coming off of a 7-furlong win, but shaping like a horse that could have classic implications. And again, I'm not saying this is good or bad. I don't think the graded system was actually the graded earning system. I mean, I don't think anybody's making a case that that was a better system. I've heard folks like our colleague Mike Watchmaker advocate that maybe it should be like the Breeders' Cup, where there's a committee that in certain instances where a horse didn't fare well under the point system but would, in handicapping terms, fit as one of the top 20 betting choices in the race, that a committee could be able to finalize the field. Maybe this is just a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but I'm also a little bit sympathetic to that point of view, that a committee of humans who follow the game thinking about this is maybe better than any automatic system. Mike, what do you think about that?
You know, I don't know. I mean, again, I go back to who was potentially excluded that we're quibbling over. I mean, and I look at it like this, like, everybody knows the point system. It's not like anything has changed in the last year or two. You've got a 2-year-old right now that you're excited about. You know exactly what you need to do in order to get there in the Kentucky Derby. And if there's a setback or something like that, then, you know, you take the route of the Texas Reds and the shared beliefs, and you say, okay, we're going to, you know, call an audible and get the horse right. And so, you know, I don't know. I think that you play the game as it's laid out, and you know, this is just the way the game is played now. I don't really see a major problem with it, and I don't think it has eliminated really legitimate live horses in the last few years that absolutely should have been in the gate.
Yeah, that wasn't my point ever. You know, it's not so much that those horses were live so much as I just think it's interesting to talk about the effect that they might have on the race. Jonathon, any further thoughts on this before I get to my next very obvious question?
No, when I'm always, you know, I always end up talking about horse racing to cab drivers and Uber drivers for some reason. And when they ask me about the Kentucky Derby, one of the reasons I tell them it's so special is it's not like the Super Bowl. It's not like, oh, well, our quarterback got hurt. There's always next year. Like, that's what's awesome about it, is that if things don't go right, you don't get in the gate. And that's what makes it special. That's what makes a Triple Crown Trail special. That's what makes a Santa Anita Derby special, the Florida Derby special, that if you get unlucky, it could cost you an opportunity of a lifetime to get into that starting gate. So I would never want it to be a subjective situation where people are making a decision based on what they think. I want it to be, I want it to keep that excitement that it has.
That's interesting. I like that point. All right. Speaking of opportunities of a lifetime, Nyquist, who won the Kentucky Derby, certainly has one with the upcoming Preakness Stakes, where he looks like he'll be an overwhelming favorite, and then the opportunity to come back in 3 weeks' time and do what just a year ago would have seemed unthinkable and become the second Triple Crown winner in a row. I'll just ask the obvious question. Mike, do you think he'll do it?
I think I will hedge a little bit and say I'm pretty sure.
Mike? I don't believe it.
I'm pretty sure he will be going for it on the Belmont. I would be very surprised if he does not win the Preakness. And then we'll just see who all is going to be lining up against him in the Belmont. But based on what I'm seeing for the Preakness, I would be hard-pressed to think he loses.
Mike, we'll accept that answer. A little wishy-washy, though. Jonathan,
Sorry.
how about you? Can you give me something definitive here? Do we have another Triple Crown winner in Nyquist?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to beat him. I don't typically try to beat, these types of horses. I'm going to try to beat him along the way, but I think you probably will. I mean, if you look at some of the horses that have been faced with the opportunity, they've gotten favorable setups somewhere along the line. Like, I think people thought Orb was the next Triple Crown winner, and then he got, you look back, he had that huge setup in the Derby, and it's a hard thing to do, but if what he did last Saturday is real, and we're not missing something about why his performance was so good, I think he's extremely likely to do so. And I'm a little bit bummed about it, to be honest with you, because I got to go to the last one, and it felt kind of special, and if it happens again, it starts to lose the
Well,
I hadn't thought about that way.
Do you knock Affirmed for winning the year after Seattle Slew?
No, I don't. But well, there's a couple reasons why I don't knock Affirmed. One is because I was still not a creation at that point, so I don't even remember. There's nothing. But,
you have YouTube. You've watched the races. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I just it's just one of those things. It's like my friend Robert actually made a joke one day when there's this taco spot in Austin that he used to love that no one knew about, and then a bunch of people found out about it, and he doesn't like it anymore. It's the same idea. It's cool.
It was our thing.
Yeah, and then when it starts happening, then it loses the coolness. And so, selfishly, I don't want it to happen, but it'd be great for the sport, obviously, if it does.
It's like that Yogi Berra quote, nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded.
Exactly. For me, I do take that point, especially with American Pharoah being a horse who I felt like I was on the right side of history with American Pharoah. That was somehow important to me. I mean, I bet him in the Derby, and I believed he was a good bet. But there was also something about the way he came into that race and I just wanted that to happen from the get-go. I don't want this to happen from the get-go. Obviously, everybody here heard what I said about Nyquist, hardly ringing endorsements while I acknowledge his obvious merits coming into the Derby. And I'm just going to, but because I don't want to hedge, I'm just going to say he's not going to do it. It seems extremely, I agree, like my first gut reaction of course he'd be a pretty short price. I think the price I've seen offered is 6-1 right now on him to win the Triple Crown. And my first blush is like, that's not a bad price, but I'm not going to take it. I'm going to sit on the other side on this one, and I'm not going to be interested in laying 6-1 to anybody for that bet. But at the same time, maybe it's just too obvious, and maybe this is horse racing. Weird, unpredictable stuff happens. I like Nyquist a lot as a horse, but I don't think that's in particular going to be something we have to worry about this year. We will see. But I will say this. All that said, I was seeing somebody discussing this the other day. The question of whose Derby was more impressive, Nyquist or American Pharoah. And despite everything I just said about Nyquist, I'm going to say I think just like in looking at a performance, Nyquist Derby was more impressive than the Pharoah. Jonathan, do you think I'm onto something with that?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with it. I mean, I don't think that Nyquist could warm American Pharoah up, but I think his race was better, that's for sure.
Mike, where do you stand on that issue?
I would agree. I mean, I think we talked about it at the time last year. American Pharoah ran like a horse that wasn't really getting over the track as well as he had in previous races. He ran like he maybe even is the kind of horse that you want to bet and you think could move forward off that race, and he still won. Nyquist looked much more impressive in winning. It's tough. I don't know. I think the jury is still out on this crop, and the jury is still out on how good Nyquist is. But I'll say this: everybody he's faced, he has handled, and he has handled pretty easily. And part of the reason why I think he's going to win the Preakness, and my only question about the Belmont is, any of the horses he's run against before, the Exaggerators, the Sudden Breaking News, the Brody's Cause, I have no concern about him beating them in the Belmont. My only question is the new ones like the Unifieds and that play the role of tonalist that could potentially take him down. But as far as where he is now, he is by far the most accomplished and most the classiest 3-year-old, maybe since back to Seattle Slew, just compared to, not necessarily compared to the rest of history, but compared to him versus his peers right now. He is.
I mean, looking at the resume, you can make that case. I mean,
yeah.
Being undefeated and all, and then running a fast Derby where that you could possibly make the upgrades that we've all suggested. I don't think that sounds crazy at all.
Yeah, I mean, I would put it this way: it's like a draft in any other sport. The distance between the number 1 pick and the number 2 pick, some years is almost nothing. This year, it's huge.
I think that sounds right, but I will just make the point that we are dealing with, teenagers here, and the bodies change, abilities change. Like things could change. Well, I think what you're saying, Mike, is true right now. It could change in 8 days, and it certainly could change in 3 weeks and 8 days. So
sure.
Stay tuned, folks. It's going to be fun. We'll be following these 3-year-olds throughout the year here on the podcast. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So we got some contest action going on in the Daily Racing Form universe this weekend. We've got on the new tournament site, tournaments.drf.com, a free chance for folks to win their way into the NHC on Saturday. You're going to want to get registered with that platform. This is a great opportunity to do it, a free roll with a shot at, I think it's up to 4, or not up to, I think it will be 4 NHC seats. Also, if you're a tour player, Boku Tour points on the line in those free NTRA-sponsored events. You're going to want to check those out. We've also got another round 1 contest this weekend on bcqualify.com. We've got action both days on drfqualify.com, including the final chance to win your way into next weekend's Preakness contest at Santa Anita. I'm flying out there on Wednesday. That should be fun. The other day on DRFQ, we've got another qualifier for Monmouth. Tons of action. NHC Qualify has a contest of its own this weekend, too, on Sunday, I believe. A lot of stuff going on. Jonathon, do you expect and project to be playing in tournaments this weekend?
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely playing in that free one. That's a great opportunity for some sneaky tour points, and look, if you're a person that doesn't see yourself playing a lot of tournaments this year, it's one of those events that if you can sneak around and get 1,500, 2,000 tour points, and then you place in another live event in your local town, it could sneak you into to the NHC just off of tour points alone. And so there's always at least one guy I've noticed the last few years that just somehow has this really big score in this free event because there's so many people playing in it. So I would definitely take a look at that. And then Santa Anita, it's the last opportunity to qualify for my well-publicized favorite tournament out there at Santa Anita.
The home game for you.
Yeah, well, a home game with a 3-hour flight, but it's direct, so I'll be all right. So I'm looking forward to trying to sneak in there, and I've done typically well when I get focused and try to get out there. Maybe it's just the excitement of getting to the Eddie Logan that helps me do a little bit better.
It's a beautiful place, no doubt about it. For folks interested in the free contest, you do need a $50 NHC Tour membership. But that's not just for this contest. That gets you in any NHC contest for the rest of the year. It also entitles you to discounts on Daily Racing Form past performance packages. So in that way, that $50 essentially pays for itself. There's really no reason not to do that. If you're looking to step up and try a contest, it's a pretty good one to do simply because it's free. That said, it's also extraordinarily difficult because the number of players means that, I talk sometimes about how I love the BC Qualify round 1 contest because you have to finish in the top 10% to advance to round 2. So you don't need the miracle day. You just have to pick winners and play your game. And if you have a good day, you're going to advance. The NTRA free contest, you're pretty much looking at a miracle day. You need to, there's been certain years where there's, I think this one, there's 12 races. Another interesting thing about this free contest is we're using the all-in format where all the picks have to be in before the first race. It wouldn't surprise me if the winner has 7 of the 12 winners in this contest, or in some years it's even more. Jonathon, what's your advice for playing in the free contest? Different people have different attitudes about how to try to get the job done. Especially with the all-in format, if somebody asked you what price range should I try to be playing in this contest, what would you say?
I would play 10-to-1s and above, and I wouldn't play horses that are 10-to-1 morning line that are going to end up at 7-to-1 morning line. So I would take that into consideration, because the idea of, if you're really trying to get an NHC seat here, I mean, there's going to be, if there's 4 cap horses, the person who wins is going to have 3 of them. So it's like, you got to just, shoot for the stars, hope you can catch 3 or 4 horses, a couple of place horses, and next thing you know, you're doing well. We've talked about it a million times. Play what you like. I'm the king of taking a 3 to 5 shot in a $2 win place tournament. This is not the event you want to do that in.
That's interesting. But now the author of the Play What You Like quote, Paul Sherman, in my book, The Winning Contest Player, sort of surprised me by saying in this contest he just tries to shoot the moon. He'll just try to pick every winner and not care as much about the price. But that's a contrarian. Those are the 2 different approaches. I've heard a lot of people who qualify do it the way that Jonathon just suggested. Dean Kepler, friend of the podcast, who qualified via the free contest last year, did it that way. Others just try to pick every winner and don't worry as much about it. It's a little bit up to you, but again, for free, it's a free roll. It's a chance to get involved.
But with that said, I'm just trying to get top 100, so I won't be doing that. I'm going to just try to pick winners, but because I've already, I don't need the top 4 doesn't really do me any good, so.
Right. Well, an outright win wouldn't hurt your overall NHC Tour defense chances, but I take your point. For you, there's probably more sort of expected value in the whole situation by just getting that top 10% finish and getting the Tour points. It's people like Jonathon who already have their 2 qualifications. The dynamics get a little bit different. Of course, you're limited to 2 spots in the NHC. When it comes to the BCBC, you can play 2 in the tournament, but even after that, those spots have a cash value. You can transfer, sell them to a friend and get that money. One of the interesting dynamics in choosing between those 2 types of seats, I wrote a piece about that's up on the website now. Not sure if you had a chance to check that one out, Jonathon, but probably worthy of a little bit of attention of the sort of relative value of the NHC and BCBC spots. All right, let's move on to these races. We've got 4 public handicapper races. We're going to throw in the Peter Pan at Belmont. Let's start with race 7. It's the Ruffian, a grade 2 for 3 and up fillies and mares, going a mile, 1 turn at Belmont. Mike, who did you come up with in the Ruffian?
I'm generally, I think the favorites can win. It's a short field. It's an interesting field. You've got 2 legitimate favorites in Cavorting and Carumba. And it's surprising to me a little bit that Carumba is the favorite on the morning line. I would imagine it's going to be Cavorting in the actual wagering, but who knows? I'm going to take a stand against both of them. I think a horse like Calamity Kate, coming off of the layoff, who has speed, I think this is a good 1-turn miles, a perfect distance for her. I think she's going to run a big one in the first start off the layoff and is an absolute player in here. The other one I like is a little bit of an upset chance is Spelling Again, coming out of that really tough Madison where she had some trouble. I would probably lean on both of those in the multi-race wagers and just try and get nice value by beating those 2 favorites.
If you're right, you're certainly going to get paid. Jonathon, I'll ask you, before I ask you your pick, I'm going to ask you, do you agree with Mike that Cavorting will be shorter than Carumba in the Ruffian betting?
Yeah, I think so. Just off of her Naira Stakes wins, I think that she'll, those bettors, that obviously that are betting Belmont follow Naira, and they've seen some of the big races that she won last summer. So, yeah, that sounds about right. However, and look, this is, I don't know where you want to take this, but her 2 worst races have come at a mile, right? But her best race came at 7-8, so it's like, does it really make a difference? The rail draw and the price are enough for me to fade her in this situation. I think Carumba is going to be extremely tough to beat. second off for Shug. Shug, Mott, those guys, when you can get them second off as guys that don't crank their horses first out, and then they run huge numbers and huge performances, and now you're getting them second off of that in a small field that they're going to be able to avoid trouble when they're tactically drawn outside. Like, it feels like free money to me. I don't see myself going any other direction than Carumba.
I'm going to suck the chalk with you, Jonathan, on this one. I like Mike's cases for his long shots, but I just think Carumba is going to get the absolutely perfect setup, has enough tactical speed to not let those two horses Mike mentioned get too far in front of him. And I think she's going to be the favorite. I wouldn't be surprised if Carumba's odds on here, honestly, with between just recent speed figure stuff and just thinking about the trips. I think the market's going to come for Carumba in a big way, so she's one I'll be looking to more in multi-race plays. I don't think she's one that I could, in good conscience, advise a win bet on, or even it's a really hard one for a contest like Public Handicapper, because with as short as I think she's going to be, she doesn't do me all that good in terms of my overall ROI. I might just play her anyway, but you could really make a case that if you like a horse this short in a contest like Public Handicapper where you could pass races, that you might as well almost pass rather than risk the money in case that you're wrong. If you were in a contest situation, Jonathan, where you had to essentially stab and go away from your main opinion to reach for a price, have you thought about the race enough to know which shot you might want to take? I think I'd be tempted to go with Mike's Calamity Kate in that instance.
Yeah, I would probably go with Spelling again, and honestly, because in those situations when I'm trying to beat a horse that I think can't lose, I'm going to take the longest price of my opinion. I think Calamity Kate makes sense, but I'm going to take Spelling again. She was entered, I believe she was entered in the Humana Distaff last weekend. Brad Cox decided to send her up to the Ruffian, which I'm assuming he felt was an easier spot. At least an easier spot in terms of getting a placing. And I know she worked well down at Churchill. I remember seeing her name on the workout report, and so I would probably lean there just because of the price.
All right, but in terms of our official picks for the purpose of the podcast, Mike going with Calamity Kate with a little bit of love for Spelling again. Pete and Jonathan both landing on Carumba. I just referred to myself in the third person. I don't want to make a habit of that. And then we both mentioned Mike's long shots as possible other horses to use if you're thinking about things like vertical exotics, or if you just don't have that chalk-tolerant stomach like the two of us have developed over the years. Race 8 at Belmont is the Bogey. This is 1 1/16 for fillies and mares, 4-year-olds and up on the turf. Jonathan, we'll start with you. What's your opinion here?
I'm going with the filly who's returning to the scene of the crime. One of the most impressive races that we saw last year for fillies on the turf, outside of the queen of the turf, like my man Travis Stone said. Tepin was my Miss Sophia at Belmont on Belmont Week last year, and she's coming off a long layoff. Rosario has reminded us that he's back a little bit in some of his rides he's given us in his short time back. Bill Mott's 18%. With turf horses coming back off this type of layoff and graded stakes, and when you have a tactical advantage like this on turf and you're a good horse, like, I have a hard time not using you just because of the way these races are run from at time to time with people grabbing, and I think she's going to be really tough in this spot, so I'm going to go with my Miss Sophia.
I was sitting with you that day, June 5th at Belmont, when my Miss Sophia won, and won in just visually eye-popping fashion, and I think we all sort of felt that it was going to be one of those days we look back on. It was like, wow, we were here for my Miss Sophia's coming out party. After that last year, 0 for 3. Not bad figures, good figures, in fact, better than the day that impressed me so, but still, I have to admit, I was left at the end of the season with a little bit of a taste of disappointment. Does that give you any pause, Jonathan, when looking at my Miss Sophia?
No, I mean, it feels like she just kind of went the wrong direction, and so we saw the break, and now we've got Mott bringing her back into a graded stakes here, ready to rock and roll, hopefully for things to come. I think she's a talented horse. She always has been, and what she did that day I don't think was a fluke, so I'm looking forward to bounce back. It's one of those things where you get a horseman like Mott or Pletcher or Chad or Dick Mandela or whatever, and you get these horses that are coming back off of these long breaks, you have to trust the horsemanship that those barns have and that they'll get him back in the right spot.
Mike, what are your thoughts on the Bogey at Belmont?
There's 3 horses in here that are going to take money, and I'm kind of against all 3 of them. Ball Dancing, she's the 2-to-1 morning line favorite, and she needs to prove to me that she's the same horse she was at the beginning of last year and the year before at a short price. I don't know if I like her. Recepta coming off of, granted, was running behind Tepin, and everybody looks bad running behind Tepin. But coming off of that effort where it was just kind of a bit of a no-show last out, finished 5th, wasn't ever anywhere even near the hitting the board. I don't want her at 5-2, but she fits here. And My Miss Sophia, I think she's going to need one. I mean, you're right, Jonathan. If she runs back to that allowance win the day before Belmont Stakes, she can beat this field. But I don't know if she's going to be ready to, and Mott isn't really that strong with these types off these long layoffs. Last 5 years, turf route graded stakes, following a layoff of 100 days or more. He's only 3 for 27, 4 seconds, 7 thirds. They all take money off the board at 3-5, off the board at 4-5 with emollient, off the board at 8-5 with preferential. These are horses that sometimes need one before being really good, and that's what I'm thinking, or at least that's what I'm counting on with My Miss Sophia here. So I actually like. Again, a couple different ones, because I can't just lean on one long shot. I'm going to look at some in-form horses that I think can jump up and win this. Number 4, Tapestry for Shug, looked good winning at Aqueduct last start. I think is moving in the right direction. Is going to be a pace player as well, and I think could upset with Jose on. I don't think My Miss Sophia is getting loose. And then from off the pace, from a long layoff standpoint, Sister Stroll coming out of a really nice race against Boys at Keeneland last fall. Giving time, Tom Proctor does really well off of long layoffs and turf routes, and I think she's one that could be rolling late.
For me, this is a case where we talked about this a little bit last show in terms of primary factors of handicapping and secondary factors of handicapping. And for me, as important as trainer stats are, they're still, like the one that Mike just mentioned about Mott and the layoffs, they're still secondary to me to like something more fundamental like pace. The thing is, for me, My Miss Sophia, I think looking at pace numbers, she should be able to clear and control here. But even, like, Tapestry did go to the front last time, but that was a race that had absolutely no pace on paper, and Jose just gave a really good ride to be canny and take advantage of that fact. I don't think she's got the ability really to run with My Miss Sophia early. Plus, My Miss Sophia being on the outside, I don't necessarily think she's like an absolutely stone cold need the lead type. I mean, we've seen that from her in her other races. So if somebody wants to do something crazy, she's got the great position to be tactical. So for me, I'm in her camp, but I'm not going to pick her just because I do think she's going to be hammered. I'm going to go with another one that Mike mentioned as one he's against in number 1, Recepta. She's been facing the steady diet of graded stakes, not just graded stakes, grade 1 stakes, and grade 1 stakes against Tepin. And Tepin is one of those fillies who I think just has that ability to sort of horrify and gut other horses in other fields. And when a filly like Recepta runs against a filly like Tepin, I'm pretty much willing to just excuse that race and not be worried about it at all, and just say, like, what's the excuse for last race? Tepin was the excuse. There's as much as nice as My Miss Sophia is, nobody's confusing her with Tepin. I could see Recepta getting a nice trip on the inside, pace figure-wise, putting herself into the race, maybe a little bit earlier than it seems like it might be on paper. I like her a little bit. I agree the 5-2 is a little light, but for the purposes of making a pick, I'm going to go with number 1, Recepta. Mike mentioned 2, number 4, Tapestry, and number 5, Sister Stroll. And Jonathan going with the outside filly, and who I also think is a very likely winner, number 8, My Miss Sophia. Let's move on. Let's try to quickly get to the Peter Pan. We won't spend, I mean, It's a really cool race. We could spend a lot of time on it, but we still have a bunch of other stuff to get to. I do want to put in the bonus coverage, though, just because it's kind of a cool race. The favorite here, all eyes are going to be on number 7, Unified. The colt who I'm going to be looking at, not necessarily to bet today, but as a potential Belmont sleeper, a horse who I want to see run a good race, finish up well, finish up in a way that I think he can move forward from again to maybe use either on top or as some sort of exotics key in the Belmont, is number 3, Adventist. I just like him a lot as a horse. I think he's really cool. I like the way that he finished up last time. I know the form of that race, not necessarily looking that good, but I just think he's young and improving, and it's just a horse I'm going to be, whether or not I bet him on in the Peter Pan, he's a horse I'm going to have my eye on. Mike, are you going with Unified, or are you going in a different direction here in the Peter Pan?
I think I'll probably just watch the race. I think Unified, it's probably his race to lose, and I think he's going to be what, 1-2, 2-5.
2-5 sounds about right.
You're right, Pete. Though the one that interests me, not necessarily in this race, but maybe going forward, is Adventist. He's a horse that just seems like he wants to keep running. He's not going to need to be too far off. He's not a stone closer. He's the kind of style that works well in the Belmont. And if they're using this as a prep, he could be one that makes some noise there. But I have a hard time seeing Unified losing this one.
Maybe a little 7-all-3 in the trifecta, 7-3-all, 7-all-3. Jonathan, as a multi-race player, how do you project to be approaching the Peter Pan?
Sorry, I was muted.
Jonathan.
No, I was muted, sorry. I didn't want to be breathing heavy on the thing all the time, so I muted.
I appreciate that. We don't want the FCC after us.
Yeah, no, I think that as a multi-race play, it's one that you can't leave Unified off. However, in a tournament format,
what percent, if you're playing multis in this race, are 100% of your tickets going through Unified, or would you set aside some portion to try to turn them over?
Yeah, I think just on feel alone, what I would do in this situation is I would use Unified and one other horse as an A horse, and then I would use one horse as a B as a backup. Like, I don't want to spend too much money trying to beat Unified, but I think that there's enough value in if you beat him with your other top choice that it warrants using him as an A horse. So that's kind of how I would approach it. The horse that I would use in that situation as my other A horse with Unified is the 4, Decorated Soldier. I thought the race at Oaklawn was good. Lost a lot of ground. Ran a big number. It's Todd. It's New York. You're going to get Johnny here. I just think the horse offers some value, and he's one that I would definitely consider as that other spot. I think Adventus is going to be overbet just off of that, just off of his name and the races he's running.
I don't think that sounds unreasonable. All right, let's talk about the Man of War, going 1 mile and 3/8 for 4-year-olds and up on the turf. Jonathan, we'll keep it with you. Do you have a selection for this race?
The mute button again. Yeah, I do, actually. This is one of those races where, and I do this from time to time, where I look at the race that Hogan and Wake Forest had against each other down at Gulfstream, and Wake Forest
we talked about that a bit before, didn't we?
Right.
In advance of the Elkhorn, we talked about that race.
Right, exactly, and it's one of the reasons I landed on Hogan. And what I typically will do in those situations is I looked at Wake Forest. I saw the figure that he ran, whatever figure you want to look at. If you call it the buyer figure, I think he had a 101 in that race at Gulfstream. And then you look at Hogan's races surrounding that race and after that race, and it makes me believe that 101 was real, first time, Chad Brown, and I expect him to improve off of that. Belmont has been Chad Brown's playground for a while, and I would expect for Wake Forest to turn the tables on him in that situation. That's who I'm going to pick. He's the type of horse I would single in a pick 4 and a pick 5, but I don't feel like I'm doing any justice if I don't explain that Go Around, the 5 horse, is very live with a little bit of a pace edge, especially going long in New York and these types of races where a lot of these guys like to grab and wait, and this is a horse I think that will be forward. Junior Alvarado and Bill Mott. So he's one that I would definitely consider. He's even one that I would consider like keying tries around. He seems like a really likely horse to run in the trifecta.
Now, do we think with the sort of trouble that Johnny Velasquez got into last time on Wake Forest, when for me he was pretty much of an international bad trip in the Pan American. I thought I thought he was probably best there. Do we think he'll be a little more aggressive maybe, or is this just the way this horse wants to run, Jonathan? Do we think that Wake Forest is going to need to have a little bit of racing luck once again today?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was a little bit too far back last time. It feels like Johnny waited to the last minute to move, and maybe that was just because he didn't have the room to move earlier. As the distances, in these types of distances, you never know. It's a rider's race on where horses are going to be. I mean, this darn horse could be on the lead. That happens from time to time. And I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but I think Johnny will put him in a better position, at least in the position that gives him the best shot to win.
Yeah, I mean, the pace scenario here is a little bit muddy. Mike, have you looked at the pace? Do you have a prediction of who's going to make the lead? I think Jonathan mentioned go around having a chance. Closing Bell, adding the blinkers with Lescano. He could be a lot closer on the stretch out. Who do you think is going to be in front?
Yeah, I think it's go around. I think go around will. He's really the only one. Closing Bell might show a little bit more speed, but they're both Bill Mott horses. I don't think they're going to be knocking heads too much early. I think go around goes, and I think this is a case where everybody's looking at him. 10-1 morning line is probably unrealistic. I like him partly because I liked his brother a lot, and this is a horse who seems to be on the improve, somewhat lightly raced. You got Bill Mott now taking a shot with him in a grade 1. He'll be a good price. I don't think 10-1 is realistic, but 5 or 6-1 seems about right for me to take a shot with a horse that's doing well, might have a pace advantage, and certainly has the blood.
You should tell the people about the pedigree.
Well, he's a half brother, I believe, to Go Between, who was a monster turf horse. How much I don't have his PPs in front of me, but I remember him winning a bunch of races, multiple graded stakes races, probably multi-million-dollar earner. Really, really.
We're going to make
horse.
you. I'm going to give you a homework assignment and make you tweet that PP for listeners,
yeah.
So we can check out and see what Mike's talking about with the pedigree of number 5. Go around.
$2.9 million, 8 wins, turf and synthetic, in fact. But yeah, he was a really good horse. I'll pull the PPs and tweet those out.
I feel like I'm supposed to go with short price or no. I'm supposed to just pick Wake Forest based on my opinion of that last race. A little tricky for a contest like Public Handicapper, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it, and certainly one I'll want to be alive to in multi-race wagers. What about, if either of you guys have a thought about Chad Brown's other runner in this race, number 1, Morandi, another one I was thinking about including based on 2, one was sort of he was eased in the end, but I still think you can call it a trip excuse. And then a trip last time also I thought in the allowance race at Keeneland, has some very solid form in coming from Europe, especially in France. Just seemed like the kind of horse probably wants more distance and goes out for the always dangerous team of Marty Schwartz and Chad Brown. Jonathan, is this a horse you'd consider using too?
It's tricky. In these types of situations, when I'm trying to figure out if a horse is well meant, I usually look at their price to see if they were bet. But when it's Chad and it's turf it's like long on the turf, like it doesn't really tell you anything because he's always bet. So, he's the type of horse that I would grab Mike Welsh and them's workout report, and I would see if he's outworking some big-time horse or outworking even a horse like Wake Forest. He's a horse that I would maybe change my mind and use, but at the current state, he's one that I wouldn't be that, inclined to jump all over.
That's the other one for me there. So I'm going to look at number 9, Wake Forest, a little bit number 1, Morandi. Both Mike and Jonathan casting a primary vote from Mike for go around, a secondary vote from Jonathan for go around, and Jonathan's primary play here projects to be number 9, Wake Forest, the other Chad Brown runner. All right, we have one public handicapper race left to go. We've got about 8 minutes left in the show. That sounds just about perfect to me. Our final race is coming from Santa Anita. It's the Las Barrera. Jonathan, I'll be honest, I haven't really had a chance to look at this race. You and Mike are going to have to help me out here so I can decide who I'm going to play on public handicapper. Grade 3 for 3-year-olds going 7 furlongs at your home track, Jonathan. So why don't you tell us who you think's going to win?
Yeah, this is an interesting race because, two horses that I like in here, and I'm going to be wishy-washy. I'm just going to go ahead and tease that now on who I'm going to pick. But the two horses I like in here ran huge races in the winter at Santa Anita. I don't know which one is back yet, but I Will Score obviously ran some really big races at Santa Anita. And the January 3rd race was huge. And I just think that horse is something special. And then Smoky Image, at one point we were thinking this was going to be our Santa Anita Derby winner. He had won that impressive Calbred race during the NHC weekend, and everyone was talking about him. Now you're getting that horse cutting back. This is a perfect situation in which, I think those are the two most likely winners on the card. And I'm sorry, in the race. I'm going to download the workout report and see which one's working better, and that will be the one that I split. That'll be the what helps me split the hairs. I'm against Iron Rob. That horse was vanned off, 2 back. Then he freaked and beat me and knocked me out of all these things. Then he got beat 65 lengths, so I'm back to not liking him. We'll see what happens with Smoky Image, and I Will Score on the workout report and just see who's working into it well. I'm inclined to take Smoky Image on the cutback, though. My buddy Nick Tamero has opened my eyes to the power of the cutback.
Oh, absolutely. Huge angle, especially, under the right circumstances. 7 furlongs being one of those distances it can often help move a horse up on. That horse, again, I haven't really handicapped this race, but I've talked multiple times on the show about how for that, I was in the paddock, happy to be in the paddock for that San Felipe. We had a contest out there that weekend, and that was the race of the weekend I was most looking forward to because it was all these horses who are on everybody's top 10 list of the Derby, and I just thought that Smoky Image outlooked the field. If there was no past performances and just a program with numbers, I would have picked Smoky Image every time in that race. He was bet like that wasn't such a crazy idea, the 3-1, but just been absolutely crushed the last 2 races. My gut says it's a little hard to take a horse, cutback or no, who's just gotten his head handed to him a couple times in a row without having some sort of confidence builder coming back. Does that concern you, Jonathon, or is that why you want to see the workout report to see maybe they've built this horse back up in the morning and he's ready to roll?
I'm glad you asked me because I was trying to figure out how I was going to interrupt you. Yes, so I get that, but the thing is that the San Felipe, if I recall, he missed a break, didn't get to the front, so that was the first time. He was 4 wide, and he was chasing around Dancing Candy and More Spirit and Exaggerator, all 3 horses who ended up running in the Kentucky Derby. And then he's got the built-in excuse of the racetrack Santa Anita Derby Day. I mean, maybe he absolutely hated it. He ran like he hated it, and now he's back to something, a fast track going 1 turn. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, those are both excellent excuses. Mike, what are your thoughts here on the Laz Barrera?
I'm generally with Jonathon, but I'm actually leaning a little bit more heavily on I Will Score. I think this is a horse who has really done little wrong sprinting. They thought maybe we've got a Derby horse here. They tried him in the Bob Lewis. He ran pretty good behind More Spirit and Uncle Lino, 2 nice horses. And then they tried him in the San Felipe, and they said, no, we got a sprinter. They cut him back. They sent him to Oaklawn. He ran a sneaky good race in a really, really fast, blistering early pace that came back really hot on the Moss pace figures. He was chasing a length behind the speed. He put away that horse and then just couldn't hold off the closer late. I think he can move forward off that. He's been working very well. I usually don't see Jerry Hollendorfer throwing out 59 flat works in the morning. I think this horse is probably the speed of the speed. If he's able to run something similar to what he's run at Santa Anita again, I think he's just a really good horse.
All right, so there you have it. For Mike, a confident vote for number 5, I Will Score. For Jonathon, number 7, Smoky Image, with a little bit number 5, I Will Score. And with the caveat that the DRF Clocker report should be consulted before making any final wagering decisions, which is probably in general not such a bad idea. All right, we have another minute or 2 on the show. I want to talk about the other broadcast that Mike and I are going to be doing today. By the time you're listening to this pod, it will probably be too late to sign up for this webinar live. But who knows? Maybe you're an early bird and you can jump on there, pause the podcast, jump on there. We'll wait. Okay, good. I hope you like that. That was our webinar with our friend Bart Barden from Betfair. Big news in racing this week was the introduction of exchange wagering to New Jersey. There's been some excellent coverage on the DRF site from Jim Dunleavy about this. Folks who know me know this. I am very excited about this type of wagering. I had an opportunity when I was living in London last year to get even more familiar with exchange wagering and the various benefits it provides. We're going to be going over those during this webinar. If you missed it live, go ahead and go back and check it out. drf.com/YouTube. Is that the link that will get it done, Mike?
That's it. Yep. It'll be posted there later this evening.
It's going to have
Friday
a lot of fun with Bart from Betfair and Paddy Power talking about all this stuff. It's a new world. There's going to be a learning curve, but I highly recommend that folks invest the time to at least check it out. Of course, for now, you've got to be a New Jersey Bets account holder living in New Jersey. This is sort of the canary in a coal mine aspect of this. I do know we have plenty of New Jersey residents who listen to the show. So for you guys, you can get set right away. In my opinion, this is something I'm hoping is going to continue to grow and something that we can all participate in eventually. But I think, especially because of that learning curve, it's probably a good idea to start now on figuring out what this is all about. So I recommend you check out that show. Any closing thoughts from you, Jonathan? Unmute.
No, nothing for me. Let's see. No, I'm going to try to get to Santa Anita, so that's my focus once we get done here.
Get it done. We can have an adult beverage or two in the Eddie Logan suite next week. And Mike, how about you? Anything I forgot?
No, I'll second your excitement about the live demo later this afternoon with Bart Barden.
What time is it exactly? I don't think I mentioned the real time.
3:30 Eastern Time. One of the things we're going to be doing, aside from talking about it and showing people how to sign up, New Jersey residents how to sign up, is we're actually going to be playing the exchange on a live race at Woodbine this afternoon, which is why we scheduled it when we did. We're gonna play some horses, lay some horses, maybe mess around with some in-race wagering in real time. It should be fun.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Mike Hogan. Thank you, Jonathon Kinchen. Thank you for everyone out there listening. We really appreciate your emails, your tweets, your messages of support. Hey, if you're bored, feel free to write us a nice review on iTunes at some point, because it'll just help other people find the show and help us to grow our little community here. Hope everybody has a fantastic weekend betting races wherever you are, and I hope you win all your photos.